exam. In fact, it was it was it was given that about 1.9 million students across the federation, took the recently concluded JAMB. And we all know that out of this 1.9 million students, the capacity of our institution, higher institution, to accommodate the students is very, very much limited. Because that goes to the root of the rights of these children, even though they may have passed the exam. It is inevitable that many of them will not be getting admission for no fault of theirs. But the fact that the institutions to accommodate them are very, very much limited. So we'll be looking at the issue of this right to education, vis-a-vis the role of government and what the law says about it. And secondly, we're also looking at the recently passed tax law. We're looking at the implication of that Tax Reform Act, on the citizen, and look at the legal basics and also the responsibility of government in ensuring that the tax of the people, are used to provide basic amenities, for them. So these are the two topics we'll be looking at today's episode of Democracy and the Rule of Law. We have our guests who are already seated in the studio this evening and will help us to look at these issues robustly. We will go on a very short break and then we'll return to introduce our guests. I am Kenneth Wimo. If you're just joining us, you are on to your favorite program, Democracy and the Rule of Law. With me on the show this evening is Barrister Deji Olale. Barrister Deji, welcome you to the show this evening.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
And also with me is Barrister Mike Kumana. Mike Kumana, welcome again to the show.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Good evening, viewers.
Okay, so without wasting much time, we'll look at the issue. The issue of education is very, very important, especially access to education. I'm sure that the constitution or the laws of the land, must have said something about the right, to education for our young people, who aspire, to, of course, access this education. So, Barrister Deji, what is the state, of the rights to education of the Nigerian child presently, according to the law?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think our constitution is a little bit interesting when it comes to rights to education, because specifically there's no provision for education, right to education, under the fundamental right provisions of our constitution. But there's a right to hold conscience, to hold beliefs and conscience, and to set up institutions of education under the terms of the constitution. But the particular provision that is relevant to education, and I think that's why we have so much problem in the educational sector now. The particular provision that deals with education is actually under the directive principles of state policy, fundamental objective and directive principles of state policy. That's the part 2, where what should be the educational policy of the state is actually initiated. And part of what is contained in that portion of the constitution is to give rights to affordable education to Nigerians. And but you and I know that under that provision, though that provision is not justiciable. So essentially, there is no direct provision under the fundamental right clause or the part of the constitution that deals with fundamental right that gives direct right to affordable or a good education or qualitative education to Nigerians. So in essence, the idea of education, the right to education in Nigeria, which is a socio-economic right, is one of the areas of challenges in our constitution. But having said that, we find that Nigeria is a signatory to many international conventions that have allowed for the classification of right to education under socio-economic rights. For instance, like the International Convention for Socio-Economic Rights and Cultural Rights. You find very copious provision that rights to education for the average citizens of countries that are signatories to those conventions. So, and I think Nigeria can only make proper leverage on those international conventions, even though there are rights, the fundamental rights, the freedom to hold ideas and freedom to have opinions and all the good conscience, to have your own good conscience, which is interpreted more or less as the right, the provision that gives access to education in Nigeria. But it does not really directly talk about the right to education. So that's the point I'm making.
All right. Vice Commander.
Yes. I want to read, especially because this chapter 2 that my colleague has referred to, section 18, is non-justiciable. There's no doubt about that. But section 18, subsection 3, A, B, C. Section 18, subsection 3 says, government shall strive to eradicate illiteracy, and to this end, government shall, as and when practicable, provide 1. Free, compulsory, and universal primary education. 2. Free university education. And C. Free adult literacy program. These are rights that are enshrined in chapter 2 of the Constitution, which is non-justiciable. What the government needs to do, or what the National Assembly needs to do, is to move this right to chapter 4, which is justiciable, which can be enforced in court. But what the government has done is to hide under this provision that you cannot take us to court. And because of that, it is, in fact, the Constitution said where it is practicable, that it is not practicable to give free education up to the university level, and even the primary education and primary and part of secondary education, which section 15 of the Child's Right Act says that government shall provide free and compulsory primary and basic secondary education. Free and compulsory primary and basic secondary education. This is what they now describe as JSS program in the secondary education. So what the Child's Right Act has actually done is to make it compulsory for every government, because it is an act that governs, although only about 22 or thereabout states have been able to domesticate the Child's Right Act in their various states. This is to make sure that the government will provide compulsorily, as a matter of compulsion, as a right to every child, free primary education and free junior secondary education to every child. Every child is expected to enjoy these two. If the government is not able to at least provide up to the end of secondary school and to the university, every child in Nigeria, is not excusable anywhere to find a state government that is not able to provide free primary education, and at least this free junior secondary school education for his citizens or the children.
All right. So you can.
Okay. So what we have done as Nigerians, because of our nature, is that we just close our eyes to whatever the Constitution has provided or whatever the laws have provided, and then we just sit down and watch the government play games with the Nigerian child's destinies. Nigerian children, wherever, if there is any state that is not currently practicing compulsory, free and compulsory primary and junior secondary education in the state, that state, the citizens can drag the state government to court, and then the court will pronounce that it is compulsory by reason of the Child's Right Act for them to enforce it.
All right. What's the heading of that chapter? The chapter 2, you said.
Chapter 2 is the directive principles and
fundamental objective
directive principles.
Right. Okay, by virtue of the name already, directive principle, fundamental objective of state
Yes.
policy.
Yes.
Of course, even though it is not justiciable, but by that heading alone, the constitution envisages where the government will have to look into that section, making sure that their policy direction aligns towards the realization of that chapter. Because when you look at the heading alone, what your fundamental objective and
Yes.
directive of state policy.
Yes.
And you agree with me from the statistics we have here. We have, according to UNICEF, we have 18.1 million out of school children in Nigeria currently. As at 2024, that number might have even increased by now.
Yes.
And that is the highest globally. And when you look at the spread, approximately 6 to 11 children, we have about 10.2 million. 12 to 14, we have about 8.1 million out of school children. So there is a problem
Yes.
in that area. And apart from even giving compulsory education, is the government not supposed to at least even make these schools available? Because some people even have the money to pay, but perhaps subsidize. The schools are not even there. I just told you we had about 1.9 million people writing JAMB this year. And this university capacity would not be able to absorb 30%, even if you pass. Is that not justiciable in our court, even if you pass?
If somebody passes an examination and is not able to be co-opted or to be given admission, as it were, in that particular situation, because we know what plays out in the Nigerian universities these days, apart from the private universities that are way out of the reach of the ordinary citizens, the public universities have gone into a sort of bargaining for admissions for candidates, so that even if somebody has up to the cut-off points that they want in a particular course, you discover that the person might be shortchanged. And then if you don't have somebody who will be able to push you with some funds in the undercurrent funds into the system, you lose your admission. This is not supposed to be. The government should be able to provide enough higher institutions to be able to absorb everyone that is eligible to enter the university system, everyone that passes the exam, everyone that is able to write and then present himself as capable of learning. The government should be able to provide enough institutions to accommodate them. But what we have in Nigeria today is way out of the number that somebody would expect to see in the system. We have been crying and shouting what this government from the center should do, because when we keep shouting about the state and all, we know that very well the education is in the concurrent list, so both the state, the federal government can handle. But why is it difficult for the federal government to establish universities in the core areas that we need these children to enter the university? Granted that we have some states that you don't, when the result comes out like this, you discover that maybe about 2,000 or 3,000 candidates took examination in that state, which is very unfortunate. It's the same thing that we are shouting now, that if basic education, free basic education had been provided for these children, there's no way a child would drop out of school, they would not attend school to the period of getting into the university. But the problem is that because of poverty, the parents are not able to sponsor these children through primary school, secondary school, into the university. And that is why it is possible that in a whole state where, because of cultural anecdotes and all those things, you find out that some children are unable to get to the secondary school SS3 to be able to write the JAM examination to enter the university. Because of that, that state continues to wallow in a state of poverty, because education is the light of the state. Education is a light of the mind. Once the mind is educated, you don't need to look for a particular job. The mind can set up invention from any angle, and before you know it, that state is in the global setting. But where education is denied, ordinary education, basic education is denied the child, it becomes difficult because those children will become vagabonds on the street and become problem to the state itself. So it is important to create more universities to be able to accommodate, because once they take exams, especially those people that are able to pass and they are not able to get into the university, what happens is that an idle mind is a devil workshop. The child will become something else, and before you know it, we continue to have banditry, we continue to have kidnappers, we continue to have armed robbery in the system. And this continues not because these children are incapable of having higher education, but because the system has made it difficult and impossible for them to get into the university system.
Yes, right. I want to just to contribute to what my brother has said. Now, if you look at the visions of that section 18, subsection 1, that he mentioned earlier on about the educational objective of the state, you discover that Nigeria has failed its people, essentially. And I want to read for you subsection 1 of that section 18, which is supposed to be the directive policy of the state. It says, government shall direct its policies towards ensuring that there are equal and adequate educational opportunities at all levels.
At all levels.
At all levels. And he didn't just stop there. He went on to say, what are those opportunities? He talks about subsection 3A, talks about free, compulsory, and universal primary education, which he had mentioned earlier on. But much more than that, he still goes ahead to say free university education. Free university education. Is the federal government giving free university education to Nigerians at a time when it is the cost of tuition in our institution is no longer affordable for many Nigerians? And yet, the directive principle says free university education, and then went ahead to say free adult literacy program.
Yeah, but the federal government might argue that they do not have money for all of that.
No. It's not whether they have money or not.
Are they going to borrow money to do
but
that?
they have money for other luxuries.
They borrow money to do some other things.
They borrow money to do other
virtually
things,
everything.
to make roads, to do all kinds of
and to buy cars.
To cars for politicians, to give land to people and all of that. They borrow money from abroad, from IMF, from World Bank, for all those kind of ventures. So I think this particular provision creates an entitlement to every Nigerian student.
Yes.
It's an entitlement by virtue of this provision. Despite just like you have observed, despite the fact that it's not justice, it is the principle of the state. And any state that does not comply with that policy, with that principle, is violating the essence of the spirit of this constitution.
Yeah. What's the implication of high level of illiteracy in any society? What are the implications? There are some negative implications when you have this number of people who are either out of school, who have not even gone to acquire the basic education. Just we have about 18 point something million already.
It's about 20 million as of today.
So what are the implications of that? Because of course it seems that the government is not mindful of those implications, because if you don't spend money on this, you end up spending money on security, which would have used as it would have been a preventive measure towards
that's why we have so many social malaise. That's why we have a lot of banditry. We have all these problems that we are talking about, this security problem that we are talking about. Essentially because the majority of Nigerians who are not educated, they are easily used for some of these ventures, these devious ventures that we are having in the country. And then, of course, you know that if you have a largely illiterate populace, politicians prefer that.
Why would they prefer it?
Because it allows them for some control. They can manipulate the people, they can mobilize them for wrong ends, and they can use them for election purpose. If they don't know their rights, Of course, when you weaponize poverty, it's an instrument of control for politicians. So the Nigerian politicians and the people in government don't even want the people to be educated. Because once the people are educated, there will be clamor for rights. There will be clamor against bad governance. All right? And then you find resistance against policies that are not beneficial to the people. The people will rise up against it. So it's better to keep them in ignorant poverty. So that's where I see it.
And Kenneth, you know that there is a section of this country that, because of the poverty level of the citizens, or the below average citizens in that section, the moment politicians say this, all of them will just flow and follow that politician without thinking, without trying to rationalize whether what he is saying is right or wrong. That is what illiteracy can cause. The moment you educate a child, you have liberated the society from every form of iniquity, from every form of crime and nuisance in the society. So that is the purpose of education. And if the government, any sincere government that wants to eradicate all these nuisances in the society, will first of all educate the child. Will first of all ensure that free education is made available at all levels, not only the primary and secondary. It should be at all levels, to the university level. We know that in Nigeria, because of the nature of the politics and all that, it becomes difficult to even enforce some of this. But I can assure you that if we have a particular government at the center that is deliberate enough to say, I am going to ensure that every child is educated up to the university level free of charge, he will do it, he will implement it. All the obstacles that are laid on way in the university and the secondary school are removed, and then the child will go to school. And if we do that, in the next 30 years, if you are able to provide free and compulsory education from primary to university level, in the next 30 years, we will see that Nigeria will become another land.
All right. Let's go on a very short break. When we come back, we'll look at some of the educational policies that have been in place, the quota system, the catchment area, and all of that system. We'll see how, the legal standpoint of it, where people might have to score higher than others for balancing or equality as they have made. We'll look at all of this and how it advances our educational system, and also the issue of segregation that some people have complained about. So we'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll continue on this train of thought. Welcome back. If you are just joining us, you are on to your favorite program, Democracy and the Rule of Law. So, Barrister Deji, of course, we understand some of the policies, of course, educational policies like the quota system, the catchment area origin, and all of that, in order to, of course, the government have made the argument that it's for balancing equality, equity, making sure that all sections of the country gain access to education and develop equally. But on the other hand, some people have also advocated that the merit-based admission system should be encouraged. You do not shortchange others in order to. So what do you have to say concerning this? this issue, this politics? Because
Well, I think this problem started uh, from the origin of this country, because you have these geopolitical divisions and the fact that some parts are regarded as underdeveloped or undereducated, and some other people are regarded as more progressively educated than others. So the idea of this catchment area quota system to allow for maybe some balancing was created at that time. But if you really look at the provisions of our constitution, it's a total violation, of the constitution, because there is no justification, no equality, no justice in a situation where somebody scores so high and he doesn't get admission, and somebody who did not score as much or even up to the threshold expected for that admission is given admission on the basis of the fact that is either from a particular part of the country, or is of a particular origin, or is from a particular state. So I think there is inequality. Okay. Now, what Nigeria needs to do, maybe there is a need to segregate educational system. Okay. That you cannot have situation where people who pass on merit are prevented or denied admission just on the basis of the fact that they want to create space for some other group. I think what should be done is allow those who have the qualification, who are merited, to all go in, and then those people that you want to give some advantage or benefit to, you cannot create either a different institution for them, or you add them to whatever number of students that is to be admitted on the merit. But what I am personally against, if you look at the position of the constitution, it does not allow those. It's an like I said earlier, it's an entitlement. The right to education is an entitlement. Okay, and if we cannot take care of all those who are entitled to education, then you can segregate and say, okay, those who don't meet up with the standard from a particular country, part of the country, go to so institutions. They don't have to go to the same institution that they do not qualify for. If you understand what I'm saying, they don't have to go for courses that they are not qualified for. They can as well go for other areas that can meet up with the qualification or the kind of performance that they have. I am not one of those people who believe in use of federal character quota system in the educational sector or catchment area. I don't believe in it as a person.
All right.
Because of the inequality, injustice involved.
All right. But some people have also, found a little bit of fault even in the current arrangement, whereby Anamaka, who obviously was born and bred up in Kano, for instance, and Musa, who was born and brought up in Kano, exposed to the same educational standard, but Amaka is not from Kano. Musa is from Kano. They went to them primary school. They went to the same secondary school, and they are seeking admission. And Musa, who is from Kano, will now have to score very low in order to get admission into a federal university. Amaka, who is obviously from the other side, who has been termed educationally advantaged area, will now have to score high, even though they went to the same school, they're exposed to the same social background. So what is this not a form of injustice?
That is injustice. That is unfair, because it's a discrimination against the child as provided for in the Constitution, that no citizen shall be discriminated against by way of tribe, religion, sex, and race. Anything that tries to discriminate against a particular person because of where he comes from, or because of his sex, or because of his background, is illegal. And that one is even enforceable. That is why I think somebody took this matter to court at a particular time concerning unity schools, that we wanted a situation that the court would pronounce that it is illegal for them to continue to operate quota system, whereby somebody from a particular section of the country will score maybe 100, and then somebody from
300.
another section will score 300 or 400, and the person in that section that scored 100 is admitted because they said that he's coming from educationally disadvantaged state or region. That person was, in fact, he was still pursuing the matter. I don't know where, after the pressure now that the matter was withdrawn. If that matter had gone on till, and I'm sure the court would have pronounced on it that it is illegal. It's wrong. It's against the constitution to practice a situation that because of where somebody is coming from, then you are, the person is disadvantaged, is not able to gain and learn into educational facility, and then the government is encouraging, because you cannot tell me that the federal government has put in place all this quota system that is not reflected in the constitution. It's not part of our constitution. So where do you get the quota system to now say that this particular person, what is the justification for saying that the particular region or a particular state is educationally disadvantaged, a particular state is educationally advantaged? Where was this particular state when when this other one was going to? So what we are saying is that everybody should be the same equal opportunity should be given to every child, no matter where you come from, to enter into a school and then perform his own decision. It's not an issue that you say that because somebody is coming from a particular place and is disadvantaged, that is why you want to bring him at par. It is not possible. It's not possible in this country to bring everybody to the same level of education. Even in nature itself, even God himself did not create everybody to be the same. The fingers that we have are not equal. They have different sizes, and so are the human beings. Men are in sizes, and there is no way you can tell me that because a particular man comes from here, he must be like this. A particular woman comes from here, it must be like this. That particular arrangement, that particular this is segregation, and it should be discounted and it should be discontinued. And in fact, Nigerians should rise to ensure that this is struck out from our practice.
Now, I also want to say that that's the reason why we have mediocrity in governance.
Yes,
in Nigeria. That's the reason why you see a lot of people in the public service, in the civil service, they cannot perform to expectation. They cannot perform to optimal level. And and many of them are holding very high sensitive positions because of where they come from, because of the religion that they practice, because of who they are. And yet the output is very, very low because many of them got into institutions with low qualification, low mentality. And when you begin to exalt mediocrity to a height in the educational sector, where education is no longer the basis for determining the competence of anybody, but where it comes from, then what you have is what we are having now in Nigeria, that nothing is working. Because most of those who are holding political offices, most of those who are holding the civil service, many of them are not supposed to be where they are today. So I think we are discriminating against people on the basis of the fact that, okay, they are educationally advantaged. How do you say a state is educationally advantaged compared with others? Why can't that other state improve their quality of their education? Why they improve the quality of their facility? Why must they continue to produce substandard educational students and expect to occupy
and be rewarded
for that incompetence, for that low performance? I don't get it. Nigeria needs to develop above this mediocrity that we are talking about, this sectionalism and discrimination. We must allow merit in this country so that those who are entitled to education, who have performed well, should be given the opportunity. And that's why we have a lot of frustration. Many of them end up going outside the country. Those of them who have money, whose parents can sponsor their education. But the majority of Nigerians who are brilliant, who have no opportunity to go to the universities, they are discriminated against because either their state, standard of education in that state is high, and in other states is not high. If a state does not have a high standard of education, whose fault is that? The governors of those states should improve the quality of their own education. So that's my view on it.
All right. So, by rounding up on this, what would you advise the government to, in terms of this issue of rights to education? What would be your advice?
Very well. My advice to the government is that it should create more educational institutions to accommodate these children from primary, secondary through the university, especially the tertiary institutions. So many people at the end of the day, when they finish secondary school, they are unable to gain admission into the university because of the number of universities that we have in Nigeria today. That is one. And then the issue of quota system should be discountenanced. Every child should be given equal opportunity, no matter the place, the region, the state that you come from.
All right. Thank you very much. So, by what will be your advice? Let's just, yes, sorry, let me just add, because we're almost moving out from this topic, because some people have said that JAMB, which is the main body who regulates entry into the tertiary institution, some people have complained a lot that it shouldn't be a revenue generating body.
Yes.
Of course, we see it as it's presently considered, it generates a lot of revenue.
Yes.
And some people have even alleged that that is why they fail a lot of students, because they will need to re-register again. Some people who have complained bitterly in social media that their wards who scored 300 last year and were unable to get admission, scored far below. Perhaps it was they were demotivated. You could imagine scoring 300 over an exam of 400 and you couldn't even get admission. You score far above the cutoff mark, and you now need to write again. Some have even said that this JAMB should even be allowed to stay for like 3 years while you search for admission. You don't need to be writing it every year if you pass. But because there are some people who have said, because the revenue generating agency, they want people, to be paying every year. So should they be?
Well, I think one of the most weak policies this government has evolved over time is this idea of commercialization of education. I think it's one of the major problems we have in Nigeria, or even this idea of privatization of education. Education is the responsibility of government. If the public or private people are getting involved in it, government is even supposed to regulate it to ensure that it is affordable for the people. But on the other hand, what we have is that government is abdicating this responsibility to educate its own people. That's why we are having this challenge. Government is withdrawing funds to education. The UNESCO standard is that 25% of the budget should be for education in any country that wants to develop. Nigeria has not been able to put even just 5% of its budget on education in any year, all through the account of the history of this country. So it's a big problem that we are having. And then this idea of trying to commercialize and make profit out of JAMB, I think is what is responsible for the whole situation that we have now. I was reading yesterday that JAMB had to withhold the results of 39,000 students. 39,000, you know what? 39,000 students, their results were withheld. What could be the base? Only if you say there is maybe exam leakage or malpractice, what is the justification for withholding that large number of lives in your hand to make sure that they have to go back again and write the JAMB all over again? And then, of course, you know that there are other people who are still coming. Some other students are coming to write this JAMB. By the time you add this number, and those who have failed, those that you held the 39,000 who held their result, and then those who failed the JAMB this year, you add them to those coming in next year. Of course, what you are doing is you are preparing a dysfunctional examination system. You can't cope with it. You cannot manage the number. So I think there is a need for us to do a system assessment of even this JAMB, to unbundle JAMB as it were. Some people have argued that there is no need for JAM. Why do you have to have JAM? Where even after JAM, the various universities will still conduct their own selection. So the fact that you have JAM does not mean that you are automatically having an admission even into the university. So what is the justification for keeping JAM and for all the money that JAM is raking in? It has become a profit-making venture for government, which is a very sad thing. Government should not make profit from education. It is not a commercial enterprise. It is not a commercial project. It is only evil of any government that is making profit from education. It is evil. And Nigerian government should desist doing it. Government, they are supposed to provide, as we have seen, for various laws. They are supposed to provide affordable, compulsory education for the Nigerian people. It's their responsibility. They are not supposed to make out of the people at a time when people cannot afford to eat. To go send a child to university now, you need at least $1 million to send every child to university now. Whether you are talking of private, it's even worse.
It's not private. You can't get a child with half a billion or even $1 billion into a private university.
Yes. So we need to sit down and really address whether the government actually wants Nigerians to be educated. It's obvious that the Nigerian government doesn't want Nigerians to be educated. And they are playing a lot of politics with education. We should not be.
All right. Yeah, thank you very much. We'll go on a very short break. When we return, we'll look at the topic for today, which is the tax law that have recently been passed. We'll look at the implication of that, for the Nigerian populace. Stay tuned. We'll be back very shortly.